Having had an encounter with a monster in West Virginia as a young man, Dave Spinks has been researching and investigating sightings and encounters of strange creatures all over the Mountain State for more than 30 years. He's conducted several hundred investigations in the US as well as Europe. Dave served in the US Air Force for 8 years and went on to work as a federal law enforcement officer, retiring in 2011. During his paranormal investigations, Dave has experienced many hair-raising and unnerving things, as one might imagine, and he joins us. Dave, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Well, first question, as a UFO paranormal hunter, what drives you to continue investigating unusual anomalies?
Oh man, just the sheer number of reports and sightings that are being experienced by people every day all around the world. I mean, you have to, as an investigator and a researcher, you have to take a hard look at that, because when you have people such as astronauts and military members and police officers and people from all walks of life with credibility reporting having had encounters with these types of phenomena, you have to stand up and pay attention, because people are not crazy. You know, they are actually experiencing real phenomena around the world, and you have to take a hard look at it.
So what got you interested in UFOs and the paranormal?
Well, as you stated in the beginning, you know, I had an experience as a young man here in West Virginia with my grandfather during a fishing trip. We had an encounter with what I can only describe as a Bigfoot that was throwing large boulders at us from across the other side of the river. And it extremely terrified me. I was a 13-year-old boy. It changed my life. And ever since that time, I wanted answers as to what it was we saw that day. And slowly but surely, I started coming across newspaper articles, magazine articles, television shows talking about these unknown creatures. And it hooked me from the very beginning. And like I said, that experience changed my life and sent me on my own path in search, really in three of man's greatest questions that are still unanswered today, technically, are: what happens to us when we die? Are there unknown creatures walking among us? And are we alone in the universe? And that's why I do what I do.
Yeah. So, I mean, what is it with West Virginia, you know, and its array of monsters? I mean, I'm just got a few here, like it's like a hall of fame. We got the Flatwoods Monster, the Mothman, Grafton Monster, the White Thing, the Snarly Yowl, large flying creatures, dogmen, Bigfoot, Wampus Cat, Bat Boy, Lizard Man, giant serpents, mysterious giant skeletons, and more.
Well, you know, people seem to like to label things of the unknown a monster. They give it that label. You know, if they don't know what it is, it's this monster or that monster, and that's fine. I think a lot of the sightings are actually of the same type of creatures, such as a Bigfoot. I think a lot of the dogman sightings are misidentification as could be a Bigfoot or vice versa, Mothman is its own entity, really. The Flatwoods Monster itself is actually an alien sighting, if you will. But they call it, it has several names: the Braxton County Monster, the Flatwoods Monster, the Green Monster, and in West Virginia in particular, and a lot of the Appalachian areas, they actually have different names for the same type of creature. That's just how they tend to. Different counties will call it this monster or that monster, such as, Bigfoot, for example. In some counties, it's called the Blue Devil. In other counties, it's called Bigfoot, and so on and so forth.
So what's the biggest UFO case that you've investigated?
I would have to say probably most definitely the Flatwoods Monster case, but a lot of this stuff goes hand in hand. I get a lot of reports from many people all around the state on a fairly consistent basis. And most of these sightings, a lot of them have taken place many years ago, so there's not much investigation, so to speak. Any evidence would have been long gone, most likely by then. But you kind of go out to the area, you interview the eyewitnesses, and you have them take you to the actual area where they had the sighting and whatnot. There's several cases that I'm working on right now that are fairly modern. Like one was in particular this year in an area in southern West Virginia. So barring finding hard evidence, it's very hard to do. You know, you look for things like high radiation levels in that particular area and other things. And none of the cases I've worked are actually crash type craft cases. They are just sightings for the most part.
Yeah. Do you ever find a solution?
No, I mean, basically you try to, you know, gauge the person you're interviewing, number one, to make sure they're not a crackpot or they're on some kind of psychotropic medication and so on and so forth. And in most cases, I find most of the people I interview that are reporting these things to be genuine. They really truly believe they saw this particular craft or strange lights in the sky, and a lot of times they have pictures that go along with it. So, you know, then you have to go to the next step. You have to have the pictures analyzed and see if it's some sort of misidentification and so on and so forth. So
you wrote the book Real West Virginia UFOs. Why is West Virginia such a hotspot? Is it like any indication as to why?
Not specifically. However, West Virginia, you know, me being from here and knowing the type of people that live in this area, they're not just going to come out and say they saw something that they didn't truly believe was not of this world. Because number one, it's kind of links into the Bible Belt, so to speak, and to them, to a lot of the people that report these things, they liken them to possibly something of a religious manner, possibly being demonic or stuff. So they don't like to talk about it. And they, you know, some people feel if they talk about it, it brings more attention to that subject and therefore it'll bring more bad omens to them. But when they tell you that they saw this and they experienced this, you better really pay attention because they're going out on a limb, so to speak, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So with West Virginia in general, in the 1960s, West Virginia was considered one of the UFO capitals of the world due to the sheer number of sightings that were going on here in the Mountain State. And I found a lot of newspaper articles to back all that up in my research over the years. You know, I mean, it was day after day after day. There was people from all around the state. In particular, you had in 1952, you had the Flatwoods Monster incident. Well, that a lot of people only think that was a one-day event. It was actually over a couple of week event. If you sit down and take a hard look at it, because similar descriptions of the creature were being seen in numerous places of the state. It happened the first night, then right down the road about 20 miles. The second night, a young couple had seen and described a similar type creature, and there was no way they could have had any indication of what happened in Flatwoods the night before. And then near Parkersburg and Wheeling, a similar type creature was described a few days later. So you had that event go on. Then you had Blue Book come in and investigate it, right? And then a short time later, lo and behold, there was a government-funded project in Green Bank, West Virginia, that deals with the Green Bank Observatory, and a young man named Frank Drake was put on that project. And a short time later, him and Carl Sagan founded SETI right here in West Virginia. A lot of people don't know that. It did happen. And, you know, they were searching for ET right after the Flatwoods Monster incident right here in West Virginia. So, and everyone knows the Drake equation, the famous Drake equation. So, you know, then a short time later, you had the whole Woody Derenberger incident where he had this bizarre encounter with a UFO and a character called Indrid Cold. He wrote a book about it, Visitors from Lanulos, and claimed to have actually flown on a spaceship with this Indrid Cold to this planet, and had numerous years of encounters with this creature, and to include his family members. I actually interviewed his daughter. She confirmed everything about what he was talking about and told me about her interactions with Indrid Cold's kids herself. So it's a fascinating thing. And then in the 60s, right after the Woody Derenberger incident, you had the whole wave of the Mothman sightings and hundreds upon hundreds of UFO sightings in and around the Point Pleasant area throughout the 60s. And it was so intense with UFO sightings, people would go out on a nightly basis after supper, pull their cars off the side of the road near the bunker area, and watch strange craft and lights in the sky. And there's hundreds of newspaper articles that back all this up.
As an investigator, you know, when you're interviewing people and getting information from them, Do you go in with a little bit of a skeptic view to, instead of going in like a bull at a gate and thinking, yeah, they're telling the truth? I mean, is there certain things you look for when people are telling you?
Absolutely. I mean, like I said in the beginning, you have to go in with skepticism, but you also have to go in with an open mind. If you're closed-minded, you might as well quit doing what you're doing, because let's face it, we're talking about some otherworldly stuff going on here.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, a lot of people, it's like politics and religion. You can't change people's minds on this stuff unless they actually have an experience in themselves, right? It's very hard to sway people in that manner. So I don't try to do that personally. I just say, look, this is what I got, make out of it what you want. But if you don't go in skeptical, I mean, you can't say everything's a little green man flying around in a spaceship. I mean, that's just not how it is. A UFO is basically an unidentified flying object. I think I have a little bit of an advantage when it comes to some investigators, because number one, I did grow up on Air Force bases, and I was in the U.S. Air Force myself for 8 years. And I'm pretty inept and in depth at knowing what type of aircraft, we do have. Mm-hmm. Of course, there is always going to be these black projects that nobody knows. It's so high of a top secret security level that, unless you see one, you don't know what it is. It could be definitely a military project. So what we're doing here is trying to gauge, are these things people are seeing from our planet, or are they otherworldly? So you have to look at the characteristics of what people are describing, how fast they're flying. Are they actually creating a sonic boom when they're moving through the sky? Because anything that we have that we know of, once it breaks the sound barrier, you're going to hear a sonic boom somewhere. So, we're looking for craft that fly at exceptional speeds, that can maneuver with exceptional just maneuverability, that a human pilot would probably most not likely be able to survive.
Yeah.
And a lot of these craft people are seeing, they don't have any rivets in them. They don't have tail numbers. They don't have the typical navigation, red, white, and green lights. We're looking at all different aspects when we're looking at these
things. Chuck Sukowski recently told me, as a former deputy sheriff, it kind of gives him not so much an advantage, but it gives him the ability to be able to tell whether people are actually telling him the truth. Is that the same with you as a former law enforcement officer?
Yeah, absolutely. There's little tricks of the trade, so to speak, that we use. We will ask people the same questions many times over in different manners to see if we could trip them up in in a lie, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So there's little tricks of the trade like that we do use. And that's what you got to kind of gauge when you're interviewing these folks.
I want to talk about a couple of things other than the Flatwoods Monster, which we've spoken about, but what have your investigations revealed regarding the Mothman?
Oh, the Mothman's a fascinating case. Here you have numerous eyewitnesses reporting a man-sized bird-like creature that with a 10-foot wingspan or more that was keeping up with cars flying at 100 miles an hour. That's fascinating. And you have to, as an investigator, you got to look at all aspects of this, because there are some other aspects out there. Not a lot of people know that parts of the atomic bomb were built right there in Point Pleasant, the explosives, possibly some of the trigger devices. And right down the road in Morgantown, they were making huge advancements during that time in the processing of heavy water that we know is required in nuclear fission and everything else. So also in West Virginia, there is an area that supports a special forces unit known as Delta Force, and a lot of people train there. It could have quite possibly been some sort of special forces wingsuit that they were testing. You have to look at all aspects from outside the box. But if you factor in all the UFO sightings at the same time, it kind of makes you wonder, is Mothman, or was Mothman, some type of interdimensional creature that came through and was trying to warn people that, hey, the bridge was going to collapse? Or was it a more of an ominous thing that it caused the bridge to collapse? That's still one of the big questions today. A lot of people feel it caused the bridge to collapse, and some people feel it was there to warn, hey, because it's been seen all over the world right before a lot of disasters have happened. So, you have to think outside the box. It's fascinating stuff. That's what we do this for. Is it just some unknown creature. You know, that's what we do this for.
Yeah, one of the things I found fascinating about that situation too, the reports of the men in black being seen
Yes.
during that time.
Yeah, numerous reports of men in black were seen all during the Mothman wave. And also, a lot of people don't know there was men in black reported in Flatwoods as well after the whole Flatwoods monster incident, just not quite as many. Because, you know, here we are right after the right after World War II, where the Cold War is hot and heavy between us and the Russians. The government's scrambling to find out what is flying around in our airspace that we don't know. Is it the Russians? Is it ET? We don't know. So you can imagine they were probably most likely in a panic mode as well, trying to figure out, hey, is this the Russians doing this or what is this? You know, so it was a time of high tension in the United States and really around the world. You know, kids were being taught having nuclear drills where they have to get under their desk and everything else. You know, you have to just look at all that and take it all into perspective.
Another one I wanted to talk about was Willows Wee. I'm not sure whether a lot of people would have heard about this one, but it sounds like it's got a bit of Amityville horror about it.
Yeah, about 3 years ago now, I actually purchased my own haunted location to study paranormal phenomena in. I had become friends with the former owner. This is in Cayuga, Indiana. And one day I had investigated this house after hearing about it through the grapevine, how active it was with haunted type activity. And I went there several times and investigated, and indeed I did get a lot of phenomena, capture a lot of phenomena, EVPs, disembodied voices, unexplained noises, footsteps, equipment batteries draining for no apparent reason, you know, fully charged camera batteries and whatnot, just totally draining out. And also, you know, a couple of occasions I felt as if something had touched me that was unseen, you know, once on the back of my neck, once on my arm. And the devices we were using were often taking hits or lighting up and doing, you know, registering unexplained phenomena in the house, high EMF. And the interesting thing about that house is there's no power hooked to it, and it's registering high electromagnetic fields within it.
Wow.
And there's a whole, you know, we could spend a 3-4 hour show just talking about all the nuances of the Willows Wee house that we look for as paranormal investigators that could be possible causes to a haunting. There's numerous deaths in this house, at least 3 suicides, possibly 4, and other deaths. You know, the house dates back to the 1890s, and there's a lot of Native American influence there. There's a whole bunch of those little factors and nuances that can contribute to a haunting type phenomenon.
It's not, is it not built on burial ground?
That's something we're looking into. I'm looking into still. There's a lot more that has to be done at this house. There was, according to the former owner, a child's arm bone found under the house back when she had it, and it was taken to a local doctor where he examined it, says yes, it's definitely a child's arm bone. Looks fairly old though. So they, according to what I was told, they called the local sheriff. The sheriff took the doctor's word for it and told the former owner to either get rid of it or put it back, which I found highly unusual because normally if there's a human body part found, they would do some sort of investigation. So that's still up in the air. That's the next phase I have to go to find out, hey, maybe this house is built on Native American burial ground. Or if you want to go way outside the box, maybe there's somebody that was murdered and buried under the house. We don't know yet. So, you know, there's a lot more to be discovered there at the Willows Wee house.
Do you prefer investigating UFO related or paranormal related cases?
I love it all. I love it all. Because in my view, a lot of this stuff is interrelated.
In what way?
Well, you know, you have a lot of people of the belief that say take aliens or grays, for example. A lot of people feel that some of these entities are either implanting demonic type visions that we use in modern Christianity into our heads as a means of control, you know, controlling the masses. And a lot of people feel that these grays or these negative type ETs are using some form of mind control to implant these images of demonic type creatures in people's minds. And also take Bigfoot, for example. in recent years, there's been a lot of reports where people have seen strange lights in the sky, and then there's a rash of Bigfoot sightings in that particular area, or vice versa. So we're looking into that because it may be interrelated. You know, Bigfoot or other type creatures could be ETs, it could be interdimensional. We don't know. We're just looking into all those aspects of it.
Yeah, actually, you mentioned mind control. That's interesting because back even before Roswell, when the cover-up, the UFO cover-up was in its infancy, and people spotted UFOs and then were followed and warned off, and mind control apparently was used back then.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the government, we know the government for a fact has had many experimental experiments going on where they're messing with ESP and telekinesis and remote viewing. You know, look at the Manhattan Project and the Philadelphia experiment and all these different things. You know, all these different things were being utilized to help spy on the Russians and everything else. I mean, it's fascinating stuff. So, and a lot of people theorize that the Germans, the Nazis, actually had interactions with ETs. You know, if you take the real society, and they were developing UFOs, and they had all this, they were 100 years in advance of us in technology almost. And where did they get this technology? You know, and everything. So you got to take a hard look at all that. So of course, when we won the war, us and Russia were scrambling to try to get all this technology for ourselves. So, you know, I think there's a direct connection between a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. So do your investigations take you outside of West Virginia?
Absolutely. Yeah, I investigate all over the country. You know, as I said, you know, I have the house in Indiana, but I've done literally in the thousands of investigations of people's homes, businesses, and just the more run-of-the-mill type of locations like asylums and old prisons and stuff like that, places where a lot of bad energy, you know, where there's numerous deaths, battlefields as well, ships. You know, I've done it all really over my time, and I continue to do that to this day, just trying to hope to document some fascinating phenomena that say, hey, look at this is the real deal. Bam, there it is in your face. But you know, we just captured something at the Willows Wee house that's on my YouTube channel. That's one of the best shadow type figures or shadow men you could ever see. And totally captured, just not even trying to do anything, just by pure happenstance. So still trying to debunk it as something, but we cannot at this point. I mean, other people are looking at it, and you know, in today's world with CG and everything else, people are going to see stuff, they're going to say right off the bat, hey, that's fake. I have no reason to fake anything. I throw it up there. What you see is what you get. Feel free to analyze it, do whatever you got to do. It wasn't even captured on my cameras. It was on a guy that I was up there doing an interview with. He had a backup camera, GoPro, sitting on a door, filming B-roll from another angle. And, you know, he forgot about that footage. And a month later, he's like, oh, my God, you got to look at this footage we got.
Wow.
And, you know, there's stuff going along with that. There's unexplained footsteps. There's shuffling going, and nobody's in the house. And this shadow figure walks right across on the camera. So it's pretty fascinating.
We know West Virginia is a hotspot, UFOs and monsters. What about the rest of the US? Is there a UFO hotspot that's a favorite of yours, and also like a paranormal related hotspot?
I mean, they're all over the place, really, Dean. I mean, you know, you look at some of these places, like take, for example, Skinwalker Ranch or Area 51, or, you know, some of the most famous places out there for UFO sightings and whatnot. A lot of these places, you know, and if you take a hard look at this stuff, a lot of these military bases and other type situations, these places are built on ley lines intentionally. They're built in high geomagnetical areas, or areas that are high in quartz and all these other things. You have to look at all these different aspects. Why are they built on these areas? You know, what somebody knew something. You know, and if you go back really far, the Native Americans seem to have known about these type of locations in these high energy areas, and they built a lot of their religious worship centers there, where they could watch the stars, and you know, they knew something as well. So there's all these interconnected type of situations like this. And researchers are really, really looking hard at these type of areas, and there's a direct correlation between them, I think, in the sightings. 38th parallel, 37th parallel, all these different places around the earth. It's pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah. What about a place like, I mean, you've been to Europe. Do they have the same UFO and paranormal intensity as we do over here?
Well, I spent 5 years in Italy, in the military, so I got to travel around quite a bit. And one thing about Europe and over in that, over there is it has a lot more history than we have here in the United States. So of course, there was more battles fought. There was more places that high energy instances took place when it comes to haunting type situations. And the same with UFO sightings. A lot more history. People were there. More people were there than were here, so to speak, for many thousands of years longer. The creation of man and modern man anyway, it's more documented that people were in that area much more in depth than they were here at first. So, that just goes without saying. It's common sense. The more areas people are in, the more activity most likely is going to take place.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like Eastern Europe, parts of Eastern Europe and some of those Scandinavian countries, they have a lot of UFO activity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and those areas are most likely high geomagnetical places as well, and high in crystal quartz. And it's all around the world. If you look at these places that are heavy in sightings, they all seem to have that same connection,
Yep. All right, Dave. So what's your final verdict on all your investigations? So are we part of a supernatural surrounding, both in the air and on the land?
I definitely think we are. There's stuff I've seen and experienced that me personally, I can't speak for everyone else, but there's a lot of things out there we just do not understand at this point even with our modern technology. And science can't explain everything at this point, so science changes every day. Just recently, they've come out and said, yeah, we know for a fact there are other dimensions. Think about that statement. That's mind blowing.
Yeah.
And then they're finding new Goldilocks planets almost weekly now, with these new telescopes we've got out in space. It's amazing time. It's an amazing time to be into researching these type of things and investigating, because as technology progresses, I think we're going to start getting maybe a little piece of that puzzle on some of these things.
Right. I don't know how close you follow the disclosure topic, but if you do you think we're close, or is it already happening?
I think it's already happening to some extent. They're trickling out this information. It wasn't very long ago, a few years ago, the Vatican came out and said, ETs are out there, and when we do meet them, we're going to introduce them to God. So that's a profound statement if you think about it. One of the major bishops in the Vatican came out and made a huge statement, in Spanish about it. It's fascinating stuff. Even the Vatican has their own telescopes that they study the stars with and everything else. And who knows what are in those Vatican vaults.
Yep.
I'd let me in there for about a week or so. I'd love to be able to go in there.
Yep, you'd certainly do some damage. So, I think about post-disclosure all the time, and I always think about, what the world would look like. And my first reaction is it'd probably be a touch of anger among people, being lied to for so long and then being told, we were lying to you.
Yeah, you could understand that. Of course, we want our governments to be transparent about this, but let's take a look on the flip side of that real quick. So our whole lives, and our parents' whole lives, and their parents' whole lives, most of us it's been beat into our brain that, look, there's a heaven and a hell, and this is the way you need to be, what type of person you need to be, otherwise you're going to go to hell. So is that some sort of mind control that somebody put out there many, many years ago to control the masses? I don't know. Think about the government, for example. Knowing what we know about religion and what most people believe anyway, of some sort, if they came out and said, okay, there's little green men and they're coming from this planet and they've been visiting us for thousands of years. Some people could not handle that. They would flip out. There might be some short time anarchy, but I think as they trickle out this information, it's become more of pop culture now. It's more under, with all the movies and Hollywood and everything else. I think people would react a lot different nowadays, say, versus the 50s. Of course, there's going to be some people that just can't handle it, and flip out. But maybe the government was taking that side of it. Who knows? Or there is a great deal of technology possibly to be gained, and if they have a deal with these aliens, like some people think, or if they're jockeying to try to get this technology, because we all know, every country wants that technology to be the supreme technological advanced country on this planet. So, there's a lot of different aspects involved here with that. Of course, I would be upset too. You've lied to us all these years. But if you take the show Ancient Aliens, for example, they make a great case that these beings have been coming here for thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they really do. If you take a hard look at what they've been showing for years now, it's fascinating.
They cover every angle, don't
every angle, yeah, every angle. It's a fascinating show.
Yep, no, it is. Dave, thanks very much for being with us. Now, before you go, where can people go to follow, your hunting experiences and what you come up with?
Well, I have links to everything. All my books and everything is on my website. It's www.davespinks.paranormalinvestigator.com. I do a lot of stuff on YouTube, free for people to watch, a lot of live paranormal investigations, cryptid hunts, you name it. And I also, been on numerous television shows, and you can get my links to where my books are and everything else right off of my website, events I'm speaking at, and so on and so forth.
Okay, so they can probably also type in Alien Hunter, Dave Spinks, into Google.
I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. Just Paranormal Investigator, you'll probably find me. Just type my name in. I'm all over it.
All right, terrific. Dave, been a pleasure. Thanks very much.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Dave Spinks joining us.